The same modeling also shows that by very vigorously following these guidelines, we could save more than 1 million American lives. Think of that, 1 million American lives. Our future is in our own hands, and the choices and sacrifices we make will determine the fate of this virus. And really the fate of our victory. We will have a great victory. We have no other choice. Every one of us has a role to play in winning this war. Every citizen, family, and business can make the difference in stopping the virus. This is our shared patriotic duty. Challenging times are ahead for the next 30 days, and this is a very vital 30 days. We're sort of putting it all on the line. This 30 days, so important because we have to get back. But the more we dedicate ourselves today, the more quickly we will emerge on the other side of the crisis. The more we commit ourselves now, the sooner we can win the fight.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your call to action, which has empowered companies like MyPillow to help our nation win this invisible war.
I want to first of all say thank you to the President and the Vice President for your leadership during what is really a war. It is a different war than anybody has ever fought before, but it's a war that we're uniquely qualified to help. Again, we're working also with logistics, and if you think about a war, strategy is important, but logistics wins war. It's imperative, I think, with FEMA, along with Mr. Navarro's office, that we coordinate all of these activities.
I want to convey my deepest sympathies to those that have lost loved ones to the coronavirus. I want to send a message of gratitude to the foot soldiers in this war, men and women that are providing care and comfort. We are engaged in a war against an invisible enemy. In wartime, the assumptions of peacetime must be revisited and adjusted to meet the demands of the moment. And so under the President's leadership, CMS is waiving a wide and unprecedented range of regulatory requirements. And there are many heroes in this war, but I want to take an opportunity to thank the team at CMS. These folks have worked day and night, and any regulation usually takes CMS a year, but we did this in 2 weeks.
So we are in the midst of something that is very difficult, but we are going to win. It's just a question of when. We want to do it as quickly as possible. We want to have as few deaths as possible. And we will meet again tomorrow for some statistics and some updates as to where we are, where we think we're going. And
USA! USA! USA!
But we will have lost a lot of people, and in many ways they're heroes. And if you look at what's happening with our medical professionals, it's a danger. They're warriors. Men and women are doing a job that the likes of which I don't think anyone's ever seen.
So again, there are no lines of people. There is no mass chaos out here, contrary to what the mainstream media is telling you.
And officials say this, unfortunately, is just the beginning, with the crisis expected to last for months.
I see them coming out of planes today, going into New York, going into the most dangerous locations, dangerous areas.
President entering now the Cincinnati Museum Center. 500 or so invited guests there. The President of the United States.
Thank you all. Terrorism, terrorist, terror organization, terrorist attacks, terrorism, terrorist network, terrorist attacks, terrorist group, terrorists, terrorists, instruments of terror, the terror network, terror cells, terrorists, terrorizing, terror and murder, terrorism, terrorists, or terrorist, tool of terror and torture. Third time I I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
Bad grouping of tornadoes, something that's something incredible. The power, the horrible, destructive power. America is continuing to make critical progress in our war against the virus. Over the weekend, the number of daily new infections remained flat, nationwide flat. This is all a tribute to our wonderful healthcare advisors and experts who have been with us right from the beginning. We appreciate it so much. In fact, Dr. Fauci's here. Maybe I could ask Tony to say a few words before we go any further. Thank you very much. Tony, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Remember when I was speaking to you before, I was saying this was really a bad week. There's still going to be a lot of deaths, but we're starting to see in some areas now that kind of flattening, particularly in a place that was a hot spot like New York.
And the peak of it all still on the horizon. We are live in Elmhurst, Queens this morning. Rena Roy, CBS 2 News.
Rena, thank you.
Nothing, absolutely. Ghosts. That's all they got you afraid of, ghosts.
Hello?
What? Oh, no problem.
Phyllis and William Mack Pavilion here on 7th Avenue. There's one guy in the waiting room.
The United States is continuing to make substantial progress in our war against the virus. We grieve at every precious life that has been lost to the invisible enemy, but through the darkness we can see the rays of light. We see that tunnel, and at the end of that tunnel we see light. We're starting to see it. Travel bans work for the same reason that quarantines work. Pandemics depend on human-to-human transmission. Border control is fundamental to virus control. And the use of ventilators. Access to a ventilator, 40,000 ventilators, 40,000 ventilators, 130,000 ventilators, hundreds of thousands of ventilators. I knew that every person who needed a ventilator and didn't get one would die. Who got a ventilator and who didn't get ventilators, get them ventilators, and the ventilators that they need. The ventilators, as many ventilators as possible, 30,000 ventilators, 150,000 ventilators. These are high-quality ventilators, less productive ventilators, a high-quality ventilator, from 150 to 200,000 ventilators, 10,000 ventilators right now.
To ramp up ventilator production, thousands of ventilators, 60,000 ventilators to lend ventilators, ventilator reserve, over 4,000 ventilators. Needed a ventilator.
Available ventilators. This afternoon I met with the leaders, the top people of many of America's big, powerful, beautiful, and, very, very importantly, dynamic ventilator reserve. Tremendous numbers of ventilators.
Vital equipment, critical areas that are in need. Battle against this disease, some ventilators, available equipment can be shared.
When we went into this COVID-19 battle,
the United States has far more ICU beds per capita than any other nation. We have 34.7 ICU beds per 100,000 people and 6.6 in the UK. There are more than 60,000 ventilators at hospitals and other healthcare facilities that are not in use at this moment. They didn't need them. We got a lot of them out, and they didn't need them. But a lot of good brain power was involved in making a lot of fantastic decisions. I want to thank our Vice President for the task force, and I want to thank all members of your task force on having done an incredible job. You really have done an incredible job. Thank you, Mike, very much. Unused ventilators, more than 4,000 ventilators. If they needed more, there are more. No chance without these ventilators. They have to have ventilators.
But here you have the Johnny Appleseed of terrorism wandering the country with his little sack of anthrax.
Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax.
Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax. Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax.
Anthrax.
Anthrax. Anthrax.
Anthrax bacterium.
Anthrax bacterium.
Anthrax investigation. Anthrax investigation.
Anthrax exposure.
Anthrax exposure. Anthrax tests. Anthrax tests with anthrax scares.
Anthrax scare.
Anthrax spores. Anthrax spores. Anthrax strains. Anthrax strains. Anthrax hoax. Anthrax hoaxes.
Anthrax attack.
Anthrax attacks.
Cases of anthrax.
Anthrax case.
Anthrax cases and traces.
Traces of anthrax. Traces of anthrax. Traces of anthrax. Skin anthrax. Skin anthrax.
Cutaneous anthrax.
Cutaneous case of anthrax.
Inhaled anthrax. Inhaled anthrax.
Inhalation anthrax.
Inhalation anthrax.
Inhalation anthrax. Inhalation anthrax.
Anthrax in the mail.
Anthrax through the mail.
Anthrax tainted letters.
Anthrax tainted letters.
Anthrax laced letters.
Anthrax lace lettered.
Anthrax letter.
Anthrax letters.
Anthrax letters.
Anthrax letters.
Presence of anthrax. No presence of anthrax.
Positive for anthrax.
Negative for anthrax.
Negative for anthrax.
Positive for anthrax.
Also has anthrax.
But not anthrax.
I don't have anthrax.
He does not have anthrax.
No anthrax.
Crop dusted Omaha with anthrax. Mass spreading of anthrax.
For the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the facts on Ebola. It'll take just 3 minutes.
Ebola.
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 Ebola. Ebola. Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola. Ebola. Ebola. Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola. Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
Ebola.
As you know, this Ebola strain has been much more virulent.
Ebola strain. Ebola strains. Ebola strains.
The Ebola strain.
Ebola strain.
Ebola strain.
What causes Ebola?
Growing Ebola fear spreads around the country.
There are fears the outbreak will continue to spread.
Americans panicked over a possible Ebola outbreak.
Fear and panic over a possible Ebola outbreak. Ebola outbreak. Growing fears about Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Tested for Ebola.
Is there any cure for Ebola?
Die from Ebola.
Cure for Ebola.
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 For thousands of years, rulers have kept their subjects under control by putting fear into their heart. And it's been done in America from the beginning. There's always going to be a war, or there's some kind of virus coming from someplace else. And so therefore, everybody is afraid, and they will do what the government wants them to do or give up their rights.
The greatest tool at the disposal of the globalists is fear. They use it pretty much nonstop, and most people don't even see it. They do this because, quite simply, fear is proven to trigger a narrowing of the mind, a lowering of the IQ, a stimulation of the child ego that looks for an adult to save it, and a reflexive obedience towards a perceived authority. So whether it's a by design financial crisis, a government-funded terrorist group like ISIS, a new and deadly disease, or whatever they'll be throwing at us next year, it's all for the sake of keeping you on the low frequency of fear.
Things are happening that we're not going to like the numbers are heading in a wrong direction. We'll have to do something that's very serious. We'll have to maybe close them up and start all over again. But I don't think we're going to have to do that. I think the governors are going to come out at a time that, and these will be individual dates, and the governors are going to come out at a time when they're ready. Some can come out very, very shortly.
We have no context for what killed those men, or any appreciation of the scale at which it will be unleashed in the future. A plague? A plague to end all plagues, Agent Mulder. A silent weapon for a quiet war. The systematic release of an indiscriminate organism for which the men who will bring it on still have no cure. They've been working on this for 50 years. While the rest of the world have been fighting gooks and commies, these men have been secretly negotiating a planned Armageddon. Negotiating with whom? I think you know.
All US states have now been placed under a federal disaster declaration in a record first for the country. President Trump approved Wyoming as the final state to be placed under a disaster declaration, which allows for federal funds to be used by state and local governments during the pandemic. The United States, which has become the world's most affected country, has confirmed more than 540,000 cases and more than 21,000 deaths. President Trump likened the pandemic to the plague during an Easter message.
Right now, we're keeping separation. We're getting rid of the plague. It's a plague on our country like nobody's ever seen. But we're winning the battle. We're winning the war. Celebrate. Bring the family together like no other. We have a lot to be thankful for. Happy Easter, everybody.
We're going to connect the dots for anybody who has ears to hear. Some people are going to want to dispute this, but we're not going to argue with anyone. This is what's going on. There is no Q, there is no anonymous that has any information about this government or anything else that's going on. They have been leading you down a path of lies, all to hide the truth. And here's what's really going on. FEMA has more power than the President of the United States or the Congress. It has the power to suspend laws, move entire populations, arrest and detain citizens without a warrant and hold them without trial. It can seize property, food supplies, transportation systems, and can suspend the Constitution. When a state of emergency is declared, Executive Order 11921 allows the Federal Emergency Preparedness Agency to develop plans to establish control over the mechanisms of production and distribution of energy sources, wages, salaries, credit, and the flow of money in the U.S. financial institution in any undefined national emergency. It also provides that when a state of emergency is declared by the President, Congress cannot review this action for 6 months. Now, with the understanding that after Trump signed the National Emergency Declaration, FEMA took over. Now, this is March 13th, 2020. Listen to what he's going to say now. This is right after he signed the National Emergency into effect.
It is only the beginning of what we're really doing, and now we're in a different phase.
This is only the beginning of what we're really doing, because what they're really doing is putting everything in place to start the New World Order.
Now we're in a different phase.
The different phase that he's speaking of is that he is no longer president, and he has given full power over to FEMA when he signed the National Emergency Declaration.
We had some very old and obsolete rules.
Those old and obsolete rules are also known as the Constitution of the United States.
That we had to live with. It worked under certain circumstances, but not under mass circumstances. Under mass circumstances is being under FEMA rule. They were there for a long time. They were in place for a long time, and we're breaking them down now.
They're definitely breaking them down because the Constitution is suspended.
And they're very usable for certain instances, but not for this.
Because they can't go forward with their plan with the Constitution, our constitutional rights, still intact.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
So he is officially telling us in a coded message that we are now under the rule of FEMA, no longer having a president. Fast forward to March 19th, 2020, in the FEMA National Response Coordination Center.
Well, Mr. President, Vice President, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your visit to FEMA. I think your visit really, as you indicated last week, by signing the national emergency, has really empowered FEMA.
And he just made the declaration that FEMA is empowered, has really empowered FEMA. Fast forward to April 10th, 2020, in plain words, it's been my great honor to have been their president. Past tense.
The American people have been so disciplined. It's been my honor to be their president. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll say it always. It's been my great honor to have been their president, and it's been my great honor to have been their president. I have a big decision coming up, and I only hope to God that it's the right decision, but it'll be based on the input from a lot of very talented people, very smart people, and people that love our country. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
He actually will not be making any more decisions. This group of people that he says will be helping him make decisions are the ones that are making decisions now, because it is FEMA that is making the decisions. And as you can hear in this live briefing, Trump obviously does not know what's going on, because he said, you should have let us know, when Mike Pompeo said, we're in a live exercise, a live exercise.
We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We're in a live exercise here to get this right.
Does he sound like a man that's in control of anything anymore? He just looks like he has just lost his best friend in all of these videos that we're seeing now ever since he signed the National Emergency Declaration. I'm sure most of us thought that FEMA was created to help people in disasters. But here's the truth about FEMA. FEMA was created in a series of executive orders. A presidential executive order, whether constitutional or not, becomes law simply by its publication in the Federal Registry. Congress is bypassed. Executive Order 12148 created the Federal Emergency Management Agency that is to interface with the Department of Defense for civil defense planning and funding. An emergency czar was appointed. Executive Order 12656 appointed the National Security Council as the principal body that should consider emergency powers. This allows the government to increase domestic intelligence and surveillance of U.S. citizens, and would restrict the freedom of movement within the United States and grant the government the right to isolate large groups of civilians. That's where we're at right now, people. We are all being told what to do, where we can and can't go. The National Guard could be federalized to seal all borders and take control of U.S. airspace and all ports of entry. Executive Order 10990 allows the government to take over all modes of transportation and control of highways and seaports. Executive Order 10995 allows the government to seize and control the communications media. Executive Order 10997 allows the government to take over all electrical power, gas, petroleum, fuels, and minerals. Executive Order 10998 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. Executive Order 11000 allows the government to mobilize civilians into work brigades under government supervision. Executive Order 11001 allows the government to take over all health, education, and welfare functions. Executive Order 11002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. That's where your census comes in. Executive Order 11003 allows the government to take over all airports and aircraft, including commercial aircraft. Executive Order 11004 allows the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, build new housing with public funds, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for populations. Executive Order 11005 allows the government to take over railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. Executive Order 11051 specifies the responsibility of the Office of Emergency Planning and gives authorization to put all executive orders into effect in times of increased international tensions and economic or financial crisis. Executive Order 11310 grants authority to the Department of Justice to enforce the plans set out in executive orders, to institute industrial support, to establish judicial and legislative liaison, to control all aliens, to operate penal and correctional institutions. And Executive Order 11049 assigns emergency preparedness function to federal departments and agencies, consolidating 21 operative executive orders issued over a 15-year period.
No, the governors will be very, very respectful of the presidency. Again, this isn't me, this is the presidency. The presidency has such a great importance in terms of what we're doing. And you can talk about Constitution, you can talk about federalism, you can talk about whatever you want, but The best way, I'm talking now from a managerial standpoint, is to let individual governors run individual states and come to us if they have difficulty, and we will help them. Yeah, John? So a lot of positive things are happening. We're going to have some very strong recommendations for the governors. We're going to work with the governors. The governors are going to do a good job. And if they don't do a good job, we're going to come down on them very hard. We'll have no other choice. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Economic council that you announced, Mr. President, to get to a point where we have millions and millions of tests where workers will be tested every day when they go to work.
And when you look at the numbers, when you look at the possible number of deaths at 2.2 million people, and it could have very well been that. It could have been more. Frankly, I've been looking at numbers where it could have been higher than that. 2.2 million people dying. If you figure we lost 500,000, maybe 600,000 in the Civil War, 2.2 million people. A minimum, if we did nothing, would have been 1.6. If you cut that in half, you're talking about 800,000, 900,000, a million people dying. I think we're heading to the other category, and that would be if we did work and if it was successful. They had between 100,000 and 220,000 to 240,000 on the upside, and I think we'll be substantially, hopefully, below the 100 number. And I think right now we're heading at probably around 60. Maybe 65,000. And one is too many. I always say it, one is too many. It's a horrible thing that happened to our country. There's a horrible thing that happened to 184 countries all over the world. There's a horrible thing, and there was no reason for it. It should never, ever happen again.